Now we're at a wonderful time where we get to recognize and honor our awardee. Each year at the President's Address, we acknowledge and present an award to a community member who has both advanced the college and advanced the community. You'll know these are great pictures. I got them from Jeanette Haxton. Blame Jeanette. We've all seen Dr. Kezirian as a distinguished professor, and as he is and was, and dressed up as Abraham Lincoln or other characters, but you may not have seen that picture on the right. So that I'm sure his family remembers very much. This year, the President's Award goes to Dr. Kezirian, as you know, and you came and you answered the ad. Rich is a well-respected and beloved professor emeritus at MPC. The fact you're still on the website, there's some folks that are no longer living on our website. But anyway, we're hopeful for you. Maybe you'll come back. Rich taught history, obviously, and he chaired the Department of History. He indicates his conviction, in his conviction that a great love for the study of history and a profound respect for students lie at the heart of his educational philosophy. Anyone who has heard Rich lecture and interact and seen him interact with students knows that he walks that talk. He was one of the original Gen Train instructors. For those of you who, as I called to the Gen Train students who are not aware of that program, it's a unique program at Monterey Peninsula College. It in itself is a presentation to talk about, but it exposes our community members and our credit-earning, degree-seeking students to world civilizations through lenses of humanities, creative arts, etc., social sciences, and Rich was one of those original faculty members, very active in it. But this award is about connecting with the community and the college. And so that Gen Train program, as he worked with other colleagues early on in the start of that, is part of the legacy that Rich is part of at our college. And other ways that Rich has connected the college and advanced the community is through the Lobo Hall of Fame. And many of you are aware of this. If you're not, it's a great, great, great institution that recognizes not just athletes, former alum athletes, but also those people who work at the college and who are students at the college. It's truly a connection. He continues to work and connect our college to the committee by his work with the fabulous Panetta Institute that you've heard so much about today, an important part of not just thinking back in history, but connecting that with today's events and making it relevant, helping all of us work towards a better tomorrow. His bio is very, very long, and it would take far too much time for us to go through it. So I'd like to point to a video that has been prepared by the incomparable Terry DeBono and Steve Rosen of Macaneva Productions for that video to share part of Rich's story. If you please go ahead and start that for the group.
In 1971, when I was interviewing at MPC, Keith Merrill was a dean, asked me, "Why do you want to be at MPC?" And I said, when I studied history, Thomas Jefferson, has always been an ideal for me, and Jefferson believed that people in the short run are going to make a mistake every once in a while. But in the long run, you can really trust the people. The key is to educate. The great dream of a teacher is that by teaching our subjects, we're helping to improve people, which makes the world a little better place. And MPC, everything hit for me. It just was so lucky. Reuben Johnson, who taught Russian history, retired. And then Tor Spindler, the line coach, retired, so they could use a line coach. So I could teach that Russian history, the European History Survey, American history, and I said, okay, I'd help out as an offensive line coach, even though football was not my first love, history was.
When Rich graduated the 6th grade, he was only 5'6", and he wanted to play freshman football at Central High. He was so short, he was a center. So by the hours, with Greg had to be the one receiving, he would hike that ball, hike it. It had to be perfect. That was Richard. Everything had to be perfect. Then he grew. Isn't it amazing how quickly you grow? So then he was a tackle. So then he went to Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara, for football.
Rich was an animal on the field and the most gentle person off the field. I've known him for over 50 years. Met each other in 1962. We were freshmen at UC Santa Barbara. He came out of the Fresno area, a hard-working family of 5 giant brothers. And he worked really hard as a young man. I remember that, his stories about working in the fields.
You know, I was very lucky growing up in Fresno on a farm. My dad gave us chores very early on, so you felt like you were contributing significantly to the success of the family. I can still remember the day that we first went into the fields. I'm 8 years old. My brother Greg accompanied me. He's 5, and Dad taught us how to chop cotton.
Back in those days, cotton was king, and then we also had alfalfa fields. Our dad believed in hard work, so we worked hard. We were the farm workers, you know, growing up, the 5 boys. And Rich was the oldest, so the tractor work, he learned that early. He kind of led the way as the oldest.
For us, he's always a role model and set a great example for us younger brothers. About all you could ask for an older brother. He took pretty good care of us.
They'd just help Dad in the afternoon when whatever had to be done. Then they did their studies. Dad did not want to do the discipline. He let it up to me. So off would go my little shoe, and I'd chase them.
One thing about Rich, his 4 brothers knew, is Rich is a real competitive person. We're actually on what was an old ball diamond growing up. And rather than a vineyard, this used to be an alfalfa field. I remember one time we were out here playing baseball and I struck him out. Well, the backstop was right over here, and Rich, after striking out, took the baseball bat and he threw it out into what was the alfalfa field back then, and to this day we've never found that bat.
We started here at MPC, same time, same year, fall of 1971. We have been colleagues and best friends ever since. I've seen photographs of him with his 1960s crew cut. The image that comes to my mind is athlete scholar. He was little All-America, and he was a first-rate student. Both sides emphasize the discipline needed to succeed. And one of his strongest abilities is to make us think about the important lessons of world history.
In the 70s, I decided I was going to go back to school. I remember I walked into the lecture forum, and down on the stage there was this guy walking back and forth, and just doing his thing. And he was giving a lecture on the Sun King in France, and he was the Sun King. Well, naturally, the instructor was Richard Kezirian. He was just mesmerizing.
His stories brought history to life. I know it sounds like a common saying, oh, he brought something to life, but it's really true. I sat there and I was able to imagine history. In the first fall session I had with him, he pauses and he says, there's something else that might happen here this year for you guys. You might find love. And I found my love of history in that class.
You asked me one time if he had a costume on because he wore some costumes. Well, I can't tell you what he was wearing. I mean, he could have been naked. I just don't even, all I know is he was the Sun King.
I used to dress up once in a while for classes.
I can recall a lecture on immigration where he would dress as an old immigrant, perhaps from Italy, Armenia, and he would, with makeup, proceed to do the lecture.
I had the perfect outfit, like I just got off the boat. I put a pillow in there to make it fit and everything like that. Gray my hair. we got to the point I didn't need to gray my hair anymore.
His hair started turning gray, so didn't have to color it, you know. That was easy. And then he had gained a little weight over time. All of a sudden he said, well, gee, I can dress up as, you know, Stalin if I want to, and I don't have to use a pillow, and I don't have to dye my hair anymore.
He also likes to place jokes into his lectures. Some are quite good, some are not so good.
I thought one day that I would have our division office manager write on the board, Suez Canal crisis, Allen Dulles, Dwight D. Eisenhower, you know, 50s kinds of things, and I would come in dressed like Fonzie. Dye my hair, mustache shaved, a t-shirt with a cigarette pack rolled up, and then looking at the board and going, what the hell is this? Erase it, and then talk about Elvis Presley. Talk about McDonald's, the first V8 Chevy, you know, that's in that period. First Holiday Inn.
I said, oh, that would be great. And then I'll go buy the black hair dye and I'll help you with your costuming. This should be exciting. But he sort of chickened out.
I think he would go to school and then dress up. He wouldn't let me take his class. But I do remember hearing about it as I got older, and then my friends that took him were like, oh, do you know what your dad did today?
And he always wanted to give essay tests, and that probably didn't make him very popular, but he would sit upstairs and he would grade blue books for hours. My dad was like, I'm never giving multiple choice because that's not how you express yourself. I want people to learn how to write. But that was what we saw a lot growing up, was him just reading the blue books with the red pens.
Dr. Kezirian is fiercely intelligent, and he can mesmerize a room. In addition to that fierce intellect and that encyclopedic brain, he grew in his own professional acumen, connecting the college with the community through his work in Gen Train, starting the Lobo Hall of Fame, his continued work as a director on our foundation, and he's now out at the Panetta Institute, and in that role he keeps our students and other students in the Monterey Peninsula connected with important issues of policy.
Dr. Kezirian has a comprehensive knowledge of what the world was about at the time in which he is teaching. And he has a tremendous love of working with students, teaching them, listening to them, and he shares with them his knowledge of history, helping them understand.
And Dr. Kezirian remains active on our Alumni Association, as does his wife, Renee. Together, the two of them are this unstoppable force of positive energy for the college and the community.
We both value public education. Nobody can take your education away from you, and that's what our parents told us growing up. That's the one thing that'll never be taken from you, that you will never lose.
And I just love that idea of community college. It's so open and it's getting into the community, and that's where you do the most good.
And Rich had over 20,000 students, so we run into his students all the time. They're everywhere you want to be. They're sort of like Visa, you know.
And my mom had him, and then my uncle, and then it's you go to use your credit card at the mall and people are like, Kezirian.
Oh, he's one of the most generous people I've ever known. He'd give you the shirt off his back.
You know, sometimes friendships are spontaneous, but you're drawn to somebody, kindness. He's a pretty good cook.
Whatever trait your eldest child has, the others will follow. And he was such a good student. All the other boys just followed in his footsteps.
He's a good man. He's a really good.
This is the ranch where Rich and Greg grew up until about age 11 and 8. And this eucalyptus tree right here was planted in the late 20s. Greg remembers he and Rich used to dig with their toys and make trenches around the eucalyptus tree and then take the water hose and fill those trenches that they dug with their toys. And Rich's was a Mississippi River, and Greg's was the Colorado River. So I guess he had that calling at an early age.
Rich, come on up here. We haven't found your bat, but I have something else for you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Really, thank you.
Dr. Kezirian, it's my great honor to present you with the 2014 President's Award, signified by a maquette of the Norma Lewis statue, Connections, which is installed in the Carolyn Page Garden in front of the MPC Library. This award recognizes the many contributions you have made to Monterey Peninsula College, the Monterey Peninsula College Foundation, to the pursuit of education throughout our community. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in providing Dr. Kezirian a thunderous round of applause.
Thank you very much. Boy, I knew it was going to be tough following that film, but just for the record, that little shoe of my mother's is a woman's size 9. I just wanted to clarify that right off the bat. Actually, I don't remember using it really at all. All my mother had to say was, straighten up or I'm going to tell Dad. You know, that's what I remember the most of. You know, Joe Louis, after his retirement, you know, the heavyweight boxing champ, they asked for some reflections after, you know, looking at 15 years of being undefeated, and Joe Louis said, I did the best I could with what I had. You know, my situation is just kind of the opposite, and I'm not being humble here, I'm being truthful. You've got a person here, me, with modest beginning, modest abilities, who had tremendous support. You know, historians now are talking about those years, 1945 to 1975, as those glorious 30 years. I'm born in 45, had my PhD by 75. You couldn't have been born at a better time. I mean, the funding in school, I was talking with a good friend of mine just 2-3 weeks ago, and we were comparing what it cost for our first year at college. It came to $1,334, University of California, Santa Barbara, everything, $1,334. He says, man, that's a little high. Mine came in at around $1,000. I ate more pizza than he did, but, you know, and that's true, Petrini's every Wednesday night. But, you know, that's the kind of support we had. I went to Santa Barbara 9 years for that PhD. I came out of school with $5,000 in the bank. I mean, I worked all the time, but can you imagine a student being able to do that today? These were glorious years with tremendous opportunity. I had tremendous support from our state. And I just say that for you to understand, too, what we can do with people out there, modest talents, a lot of support, giving them time to grow. It's a great opportunity. I realize that you have to get going too, so I want to keep moving here a little bit, but let me say a little, I want to say something about teaching, something about MPC, and you knew I'd want to do something about the study of history, wouldn't you? Okay, I've got to do that. So, and then we kind of wrap it up, but special thanks first with all the great support I had from the folks on that film. I mean, Mama and Papa, let me tell you, farming, I don't see how my brothers do it. The stress my dad went through and hanging in there, being a great father, a great mother, special thanks to them. And my brothers, the support of my brothers. One quick story, I'm watching my clock here, one quick story. You know, we went through a very difficult time with the closure of Fort Ord, lost 30% of our students. We had faculty pay cuts. They're going through these kinds of things right now. We had wage freezes. And, you know, I'm living on the Monterey Peninsula, you know, and we're cruising along. I'm cruising along, family of four, about $50,000. You know how that would be. We're doing fine. You know, I mean, why be Armenian if you can't manage your money? But, I mean, it just... So I was very careful, and all of a sudden I received these checks in the mail, you know, from the family farm here. And you know, back in those days, you know, tax-free gift, $10,000. Before you know it, I just had my salary doubled. And I call home to my brothers and I go, you know, what the hell is this? They said, you know what, you deserve to be recognized for all the work you did as a young man, the oldest son, keeping the farm together while, you know, while we were just toddlers and everything. That's the kind of brothers I have, unsolicited. And that's why I get to act like a big shot around town, you know? But I just, you know, that's the way they are. By the way, my brothers are here today. Boys, it gets a little tough now too, you know. I just want to mention that. No, Secretary and Mrs. Panetta have brought me into the family, and they're saving the day now. You know, and my friends. Well, first of all, let me go to my wife. My God, you know, there's a lot of things I don't do well in life, and they can tell you. You've heard everything good, not the bad side. But I know how to pick a wife, I'll tell you. I've got a great wife, great daughters, and I can really, and I know how to pick friends too. And my best friends are here today. You know, when I mentioned that this is kind of a big deal, if you could come, they didn't ask, well, what date is it and what time? They said, I'll be there. That's my brothers, I'll be there. I mean, how lucky. This is what I mean about the support. It's been a wonderful kind of thing. I didn't know if I'd have time for this, but it seems like it'll be okay. There's a great quotation by the Roman statesman and writer Seneca, and he says this about friendship. And I could also put family in here too, but I thought I'd share this with you. Nothing delights the mind as much as loving and loyal friendship. How great a blessing it is to have those whose hearts are ready to receive every secret and confidence, whose conversation relieves your anxiety, whose opinion facilitates your decision, whose cheerfulness scatters your gloomy thoughts, whose very appearance makes you joyful. I want to just say thanks to my friends. That's just the way I feel about you. My colleagues at MPC, those of you who are here, thanks for making it a wonderful experience. You know, Abraham Lincoln, when he was, it's about July 18, no, it's in June, July 1862, he's kind of up in the air on this Emancipation Proclamation. He's thinking about issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. He calls his cabinet together to get their opinions, and he goes around the table. And almost unanimous, don't do it. We've got 5 border states, slave states on the northern side. We can't afford to lose Delaware, Maryland, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Missouri. Don't do it. No, 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 all around the table. And then Lincoln raised his arm and said, the ayes have it. I think Dr. Tribley, when I think about the person I nominated for this award this year, I think Dr. Tribley raised that right arm and, you know, put some muscle in there thanks to the selection committee, and I deeply appreciate it. Thank you to the foundation, board members, all your work to put this together. You know something, thank you so much to Secretary and Mrs. Panetta. My goodness, you just can't imagine their schedules. Secretary Panetta might be in South Korea tomorrow, then Berlin, then Palm Springs, then San Francisco, New York, Washington. And they closed the Panetta Institute today. The whole staff is here. I'm just so thankful and appreciative of that. I'm just deeply honored, and I want to thank you all. Okay, a little bit on teaching, a little bit on MPC, and I know a lot of you have to go to work, a little bit on the study of history. You know, one of my favorite books is Confucius's Analects, and the very first sentence goes like this: to learn and at times to repeat what one has learnt. Is that not, after all, a pleasure? Oh my God, do teachers feel that way? I remember I mentioned this not long ago to just an acquaintance. I don't know how it came up, but I mentioned that, and the person, you know, just goes, nah, I don't see anything that grips me there, but let me tell you, teachers really feel this way. I couldn't rewrite lectures from A to Z every time. I'm doing 20 hours a week of lecturing, but I always try to put a little something new in every lecture, every time I spoke, because to learn and at times to repeat what one has learned, is that not, after all, a pleasure? I said on the video there, the enduring dream of all teachers is that we can maybe change our students' lives for the best and then make the world a better place. That's the way we feel. And I got to tell you this one incident. Gary McCarskey, who was in David Yamada in our first class, he's a physics teacher. He comes in after one of his classes sky high into the snack bar. He goes, Rich, if people understood physics better, if people took physics classes, we could have world peace. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that instant. He wasn't right. It's a study of history that would do that, but nonetheless, that's the excitement that my colleagues had, and I would never forget that. Gary McCarskey, Dr. McCarskey, physics teachers, retired just about the time I did, maybe a year or two earlier. One of the peculiarities of teaching is every fall the teacher gets a year older, but the class is replenished by students who stay forever young. Teaching is a generative type of act. It's one of the ways we cheat death, giving witness to the next generation so that what we have learned in our lives won't die with us. It's a great, great profession. And ideas matter. Let me tell you, they can override power, can override wealth. Take the example of the idea that finally came to fruition, we've got to emancipate slaves. Slavery was flourishing in the United States in the 1800s. The Industrial Revolution, the first thing they industrialized is textile mills. And you have tremendous need for cotton. With cotton, you can now wash your clothes. There was population explosion throughout the Western world. My God, it was a thriving institution. And yet this idea kept gaining hold, and eventually we have the abolition of slavery in this country. Now, it took a war, right? But the North could have quit. Such was the idea that can make a difference. Civilization acted against both millennia of habit and self-interest to achieve one of the greatest landmarks of willed moral progress in human history. Now, when you're teaching about something like this to students, might it also inspire them to acts of moral grandeur? And it's a great profession here. It's an astonishing profession. Well, MPC gave me the opportunity to live out the enduring dream of teachers. An important point about the United States that I think is great is, and a hallmark of our educational system, is that we give these second chances before your determinative life decisions have to be made. Maury mentioned himself, he's trying to think of what his major is going to be. He changes it a number of times. We're here for you. You didn't do well in high school. Hey, you're 18 years old, come on, we'll take you at the community college. You're a mom or a stay-at-home dad, and now your child is in kindergarten or the first grade. You want to come to school, we'll take you. Well, with a principal's signature, we'll take you even a little younger than 18. Not too much, but just a bit younger. You're a veteran who's gone off and fought for our country. You're coming back, you want to start your college education. We'll take you. It gives you that kind of second chance, all these second chances and extra support. I just love the community college system for that, because second chances are crucial in education and crucial to our democracy. We need healthy educational institutions for our republic to endure. So what's probably the most significant thing about education that we can teach? Let me quote a philosopher at Oxford about 100 years ago. John Alexander Smith was his name. And he was giving the introductory comments to his class coming into Oxford. And he says this, about 100 years ago. Gentlemen, by the way, no women in Oxford 100 years ago. Gentlemen, nothing that you will learn in the course of your studies will be of the slightest possible use to you after graduation, save only this, that if you work hard and intelligently, you should be able to detect when a man is talking rot. And that, in my view, is the main, if not the sole purpose of education. Yeah, John Alexander Smith, not me. As you know, I believe the study of history offers one of the best ways to detect when men and women are talking rot. You know, history is always relevant because you're asking questions of the past to give insights onto current problems. And a lot of people think, you know, oh, history moves in cycles. In the 19th century, they thought, oh, things are always getting a little bit better. Oh my God, we're living better and acting worse today. But you know how history moves? It moves like a boomerang. These things come back at you. And you need to know the origins of things. Probably half the people in this room have read Ernest Hemingway's For Whom the Bells Toll. And as a preface to that novel is John Donne's great poem, No Man is an Island. Let me just do it real quickly for you here. Oh, by the way, the word manor in this case refers to the village farmland. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends were, or thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I'm involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Who would have guessed the bells were tolling for the United States when the Portuguese began the slave trade in 1444? Who would have guessed the bells were tolling for the United States when the French bombarded Saigon in 1858? Or Franz Ferdinand when he was assassinated in 1914? Or the Weimar Republic when it fell in 1933? See how these things come back? I don't know how I could make sense of the world if I didn't have that sense of history. Who would have guessed the bells were tolling for the United States when Mao made that famous march in 1934? And of course, the bells are tolling for us now in those sweatshops in Asia, aren't they? In the killing fields of the Middle East, in the destruction of the Amazon forests, aren't they? The bells are tolling for us now. You need to, I really feel like history is a great instructive educational experience to understand these things that are going to come back with us. And to kind of wrap up my situation, history also allows us to live with greatness. You know, I lived with the greatness of George Washington crossing the Delaware. You know, he crossed the Delaware 4 times. You know, we were in a situation where 1776, I mean, everybody's all excited, Declaration of Independence and everything, and then the British get serious. They're going to make their major thrust in New York, tremendous armada, 500 ships, 35,000 men, and let me tell you, it's one loss after another. Battle losses at Long Island, then New York, then White Plains, and George Washington hasn't learned to fight yet. He hasn't learned to do this hit and run kind of stuff, and he almost loses it all at the Battle of Fort Washington. So the American army's escaping down into New Jersey. General Howe is right after him, and defeats all through New Jersey, and finally crosses the Delaware into Pennsylvania. Now it's just terrible winter, terrible cold. Washington crosses a Delaware, and he's afraid Howe's going to come and get him, finish him off. Howe decides to pause and camp for the winter. By the way, if General Howe, if it was Napoleon there, Napoleon's crossing that river, and it's going to be over. But General Howe decides to make camp. And so Washington decides to attack again, to give some hope at a time when we were just demoralized as a young country coming to be. Decides to attack on Christmas Day. Trenton and Bordentown, a 2-prong attack. He was successful at Trenton, but he wasn't successful at Bordentown. He has to cross the Delaware again, get back into Pennsylvania, because his flank would be open. He thought for sure Howe would be coming this time. Howe doesn't come. He decides to cross again. Now, this is the famous crossing that's painted by Emanuel Lutze. It was in every first grade classroom back in my day. There it was, right there, right in front of the row, in fact, where I sat. Sharon Jensen was in front of me. I put her pigtails in ink. But you know what? He said to his men, I want to cross the Delaware again. I'm giving you all a $10 bonus. Who's with me? No, by the way, pay was $6 a month. This $10 bonus was really something. Nobody stepped forward. So George Washington said this: "My brave fellows, you've done all that I've asked you to do and more than could be reasonably expected, but your country's at stake, your wives, your houses, and all that you hold dear. You've worn yourselves out with fatigues and hardships, but we know not how to spare you. If you will consent to stay 1 month longer, you will render that service to the cause of liberty and to your country which you can probably never do under any circumstances ever again." That's December 31st, 1776. They stepped forward. We took Howe, I shouldn't say we, I wasn't there, but we took Howe completely by surprise, drove them out of New Jersey faster than they came in, and then finally 2 weeks into January they had to stop fighting. They had to stop fighting because it was one of those winters like the East had this winter. But the hope was there. They were able to light the flame, and that's why we, that's why we mentioned that crossing of the Delaware. I lived with greatness with Abraham Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation. You know, when I first started at MPC in 1971, I felt that Lincoln deserved to be called a great president. He's the first major politician to stand up against popular sovereignty. He's the first major politician to say no more expansion to slavery. The idea was containment. Restrict it, allow it to die out eventually. We're not going to touch it where it is now, but no more expansion. That is great, I felt, on his part. First major politician to say that. But I didn't feel like he should be called the great emancipator. Because the Emancipation Proclamation, he's freeing the slaves where he didn't have the power to do it. He's freeing them in the South. Not in the border states. The 5 border states have slaves. He doesn't do anything there. I thought, that's a little hypocritical. And then he's always writing to Horace Greeley, editor of the New York Tribune, "I wouldn't have done this if I had my way. I wouldn't have done it in this manner, et cetera, et cetera." The light went on in 1993. I saw Bill Clinton. We're going to get health care, aren't we? I'm putting Hillary in charge, and we're getting health care. How far did it go? All of a sudden, the light went on. He got rid of slavery. My God. And you know what? He doesn't have to say anything about the border states. See, finally the light goes on. Richard Kezirian, who usually tackles problems with the directness of a charging rhinoceros, all of a sudden I get it, you know? And then I learned more history. You know, New York City almost seceded from the Union because the Irish there hated the blacks who competed with them for those low-paying jobs. And, you know, I learned that. Now I know why he's talking that way to Horace Greeley of the New York Tribune. And then behind the scenes, you saw in the great movie Lincoln, he's working on the 13th Amendment, which is going to abolish it everywhere. I mean, this is smooth. All of a sudden, he deserves to be called the great emancipator. And then another light goes on when he said this in August 22nd, 1862. He says this to Horace Greeley again: "If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps to save the Union." You know what he's saying there? He's letting them know, I'm going to be freeing some slaves. 1 month later, September 22nd, he announces the Emancipation Proclamation. "I may free some slaves and not free others." He's getting them ready. Boy, this guy's good. I mean, unbelievable. To the Emancipation Proclamation to go into effect January 1st, 1863. You know, I lived with the greatness of Teddy Roosevelt. Secretary Panetta recently did an article on Congress and introduced me to a quotation. This quotation that he used in that article on today's Congress, he introduced me this quotation of Teddy Roosevelt. "When you're in a time of crisis, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing you can do is the wrong thing, and the worst thing you can do is nothing." I don't know if that fits our Congress, but anyway. The secretary used it, and I think it had an impact there. Teddy, by the way, my wife's favorite quotation from Teddy Roosevelt, and she uses this a lot when I'm moping around the house, is, "If you could kick the person in the pants who causes you the most trouble, you wouldn't be able to sit down for a month." That wasn't supposed to be funny, by the way. Teddy Roosevelt set aside 230 million acres, conservation acres, and One of his great fights was for the Grand Canyon. He couldn't get Congress to set aside the Grand Canyon because of mining interests and the power of mining interests to lobby. See, lobby Congress. And so you know how we saved how he saved the Grand Canyon? He made it a national monument site. Isn't that something? He had that little executive little room and saved the Grand Canyon that way. And in his speech, he said this. He says, you know, when the land goes, people go next, and the process doesn't take long. Well, you know, that created a storm in the America of those days, and one of his advisors said, you know what, I think you're getting a little ahead of what the people are thinking. He says, I don't care what the people think, I just care what they ought to think. You know, it's, you know, just the excitement of reading about a leader like that. And then, you know, I also shared the greatness of Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement. You know what, I could huddle up every 25 seconds back in those days and hit somebody. And I thought that was pretty strong, you know. But let me tell you, to have a situation where you're in the civil rights movement back in those days, and when you get hit, you turn the other cheek, oh man, I am not strong enough to do that, I'll tell you. I was talking with Helen Rucker, one of the great leaders of the civil rights movement back in those days and also in our community today. She says, yes, but we went through training. I don't care how much training you would have put Rich Kezirian through. I couldn't do it. To be able to turn the other cheek, that is strength. To do what Secretary Panetta's for 50 years, work with people you don't like. Oh my God, I'm working with people. Well, I said that wrong. Let me rephrase that. This came out incorrectly. Dr. Tribley made some mistakes up here, I can do it. The secretary's working with a lot of people who support him. He thinks they're wonderful. He's working with people who disagree, who are wonderful people, but then you get some jerks out there too. There's just no doubt about it. And to be able to still persevere, stay at it, that's tough. That's tough. I've never had to do that, really. I admire those people. Like I say, I could huddle up in a football situation and bang somebody every 25 seconds, but to do these kinds of things, I've really come to admire tremendously. And then, you know, I could live with the greatness of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, you know, this Eleanor Roosevelt, you know, when I've really come to admire those people who take those hits and they just keep coming out and loving you more. Turn the other cheek, just love you more. You know, Eleanor Roosevelt's mother was a famous beauty. And when she was born, everybody said, oh, what an ugly baby. Oh, what an ugly baby. In fact, her own mother nicknamed her Granny. And when she's a little gal, 4 or 5, 6 years old, the mother, you would say to her, Granny, come out here, let the ladies take a look at you, and they'd all get a good laugh. Can you imagine how much that hurt? She lost her mother, you know, which still, even though you had a difficult relationship there, she lost her mother to diphtheria at 8 years old, a blow there. Her father dies of alcoholism. She loved her dad. She loses her dad at 9 years old to alcoholism. There's another blow. She shuffled off to live with her maternal grandmother. Her maternal grandmother's raised a beauty, and so there's no appreciation for this gangly, tall, clumsy Eleanor Roosevelt, who just is not interested in debutante balls at all. She's interested in helping the poor and helping these immigrants adjust. And God, she's clumsy and everything. And so you got to deal with that. And then she falls in love with her 5th cousin, once removed, Franklin Roosevelt, and her mother-in-law doesn't like her. Oh my gosh, I got wonderful in-laws, brother-in-laws, mother-in-law, father-in-law. You know, to have that battle on top of it, she's got to battle that. She's, you know, Franklin and Eleanor get married, and while she's on one of her crusades, her husband hurts her, falls in love with her private secretary, Luther Mercer. There you go again, another hurt. They patched up their marriage, thank goodness. I mean, what a partnership they had. But one thing after another, and yet, God, she was a fairy godmother of those people of that generation who didn't have a voice, standing up for the NAACP, standing up for the poor, the miners in West Virginia. Eleanor Roosevelt was there. She got in a big argument once with Winston Churchill. Boy, they were toe-to-toe. Winston Churchill, 5'5½", Eleanor Roosevelt, 6'1". They're toe-to-toe arguing. Winston Churchill says, you know what this is after World War II, you know what this world needs right now? An Anglo-American alliance to stop communism. And Eleanor Roosevelt says, you know what, if people cared more about the poor around the world, you wouldn't have communism. Boy, wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall with that one? Gosh. One story about Franklin and Eleanor here, and we'll get going here. You know, Franklin Roosevelt could make decisions. He made 22 major decisions in World War II, including the first one. We're going to put Germany first. If we defeat Germany, Japan's automatically going to fall. We could focus on Japan, defeat Japan, still lose this war. You know, admirals and generals don't agree. The buck stops with the president. Anyway, so he can make decisions, but if he had his way, he loves to drag it out, drag it out, drag it out. And he even likes to have members of his administration working on things in opposite directions to see how it works. Well, it's very early in his administration. He's got to tackle these agricultural problems, and they create the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, and boy, it creates a furor. And Henry Wallace comes in to see the president, and you know, Henry Wallace hears the furor about, you know, let's get rid of this thing, it's not working, and Henry Wallace comes in and says, Mr. President, we got to keep it, it's crucial here, we've got to do this, we've got to do that, and President Roosevelt's listening to him and going, you know, I never thought about it that way before. You know, Henry, you're bringing in some real key facts here. You know, I think you're right. Right after he goes out the door, here comes Jesse Jones, also in the administration, adamantly against the Agricultural Adjustment Act. And Jesse Jones starts, you know, talking, and we got to get rid of it. It's not working. It's causing problems. It's not going to be a success, and giving them all kinds of facts and figures. And Franklin Roosevelt says, you know, Jesse, I hadn't thought about it that way before. You know, I think you're bringing up some key points, this and that. And he sends Jesse Jones out the door. Here's two guys thinking you're being supported by the president with exactly opposite opinions. Eleanor's over here knitting in the White House office, and she's listening to this. She goes, Frank, you know, we're just starting the presidency here. You know, you can't have two political leaders, opposite opinions, going out the door thinking you're agreeing with them. You're going to undermine your credibility. You're going to undermine your leadership abilities. Here, at the beginning, he looks there and says, you know, I never thought about it this way before. I think you got some great points here. You know, there's certain phrases that have always stirred deep emotion in me. I love you. I'll be there. Maybe you're right. No charge. There's no charge. I think in this situation today and right now, there's another phrase of mine that will stir deep emotions in you. And that phrase is, and in conclusion. And in conclusion, as I inch towards 70 years of age, there's a lot of things that just aren't the same. A lot of things just aren't what they used to be. You know, my vision, my old hair, you can see, isn't as thick as it used to be. My ability to remember names is not what it used to be. But you know, there's one thing that doesn't dim with age: our ability to change the lives of others, including our own. And I want to thank all of you for the work you do. I know so many of you in this room, what you do in our community and what you have done to change lives for the best. I just want to thank you for all of that, for supporting MPC, for being here today, and best wishes, and thank you. Thank you very much. Nice to get your picture here.
Thank you, Rich. That was wonderful. Folks, just a couple of thoughts before we close. I know that the afternoon is near, but I'd like to share a couple of thoughts with you. With regards to the President's Award, Dr. Kezirian has shown us through his actions the impact that a dedicated leader and educator can have on a community. His honesty, knowledge, ethics, and passion, combined with a determination to ensure that things not only got done, they got done right. We're fortunate to have him as part of our community fabric. Rich, you bring honor to the President's Award. Congratulations. A little reflection on President Tribley's address. While he was speaking today about the winds of change, a familiar quote came to my mind. There are three essentials to leadership: humility, clarity, and courage. The humility is recognizing what we do is for the greater good. Clarity is understanding what needs to be done and developing a vision. And courage, moving forward and staying the course. Dr. Tribley, thank you for your leadership. And finally, as we close, please know that the actions taken by each of you through your donations, teaching or guiding our students, developing a vision for the college, or your volunteerism help support student success. It's all about the students. Thank you. We look forward to seeing you next year.